Good evening, everybody. I thought about wearing black, and I thought, no, Nell would not have liked that. So I decided to be loud and vulgar instead, and I think she wouldn't have minded that. So welcome to this memorial evening for Nell, who died in August. We're also live streaming this event, I gather. The organisers wanted this to be a celebration of Nell, of her pure enjoyment of life, of her sharp eye, of her compassion, her wit, her bloody-minded fearlessness, and of her burning sense of justice. And, you know, it's funny that we should be in this room because this was the room where the founding meeting of the Irish Women's Liberation Movement was held. And Mary McMahon was talking to me just a few minutes ago, and she remembered a queue the whole way up the side here of people coming up to give their names and their addresses, promising they'd help, and they would set up groups at home. You know, that was the great campaign that Nell was so central to, and many others, and for which women like me, who managed to live richer, freer lives as a result, are always going to be grateful. But the greatest weapon that Nell used to achieve justice was her powerful way with words. So it's Nell's own words that you're going to hear tonight, with people reading excerpts ranging from her coverage of Bloody Sunday to her path-breaking series about what happened to people in the courts, her famous series In the Eye of the Law, that to her book about the Kerry Babies case, and so much more. You're going to see archive footage of Nell, and at the very, very end, you're going to hear music, because we'll be hearing from Mary Coughlan. But this evening, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be hearing Nell's words, not really anybody else's words. So enjoy.
Hello. Mary Coughlan, niece. You can probably see the resemblance. We're somewhat the same height. Also, actor, astronaut, keeper of the keys, and yet another proud upstart from the north. I'm just going to read from one of Nell's pieces called All Our Yesterdays, which is about growing up in the centre of the universe, which is not where you may have been led to believe the sun. It is, in fact, 8 Beechwood Street. I was born in my own home, number 8 Beechwood Street, delivered by Nurse McCafferty, who lived in number 2. My godmother, Sadie Gallagher, shirt factory worker, lived in number 11. Annie McDade, retired shirt factory worker, who lived in number 6, was always addressed by us as Auntie Annie. Granny Dorn, who lived in number 10, babysat us when my parents escaped their 6 children and hurried off to the pictures. In that matriarchal street, there was little need of male figures. The men, in any case, frequently departed out of our lives, away to England in search of work. My own father spent a statutory period of exile there, as later did 4 of his 6 children. So the women were much used to their own company, taking, indeed, great delight in it. Every day and every summer play was supervised by a group of them gathered around Eddie Deeney's door. At 2 o'clock, after she had fed us, my mother sent me to see if Eddie was outstanding at her door. She always was. And my mother would take off her apron, pick up her cushion, and meander up to Eddie's, where she sat herself on the ground amid the circle of females and indulged in the exchange of hot news. Occasionally, she picked out one of her nearby brood and instructed us to go into the house and bring her one single cigarette. One woman, one cigarette in those post-ration days. The ritual was repeated at 7 in the evening after tea, there being no television to compete with conversational talent. There was no sliced pan or tiled fireplace back then either. Our kitchen was dominated by a large black range, the bane and pride of my mother's life, throwing out great heat and producing lively baked bread. Our scones were famous, especially on Saturday nights, when we tried to coax them newly warm from her and slap melting butter on before the midnight hour was struck and the fast began for Sunday communion. The streets were rich with amusements, We played handball against gable walls, tied rope swings around telegraph poles, chalked hopscotch on the pavement squares, wheeled hoops, dug holes for marble games in the dirt, roasted potatoes in the back lanes over little fires, gathered chestnuts for conkers, shot pieces of paper from elastic bands, and organised gang warfare. A not unusual occupation given the notables after whom Bogside streets were named: Wellington Street, Nelson Street, Blucher Street, Waterloo Street. Our heritage and intimate knowledge of ambush spots served us well in 1969 when the Battle of the Bogside began in earnest. Good on you, Auntie Nell. Deirdre McDade and I won the competition for the longest kiss on Halloween night, pressing our closed mouths firmly together for a count of 800. I only broke off back of Lane Marathon because I could hear my mother calling us from the front street to come in for the family rosary. Later I grew to prefer the embraces of Fitz McLaughlin, who always ate chocolate before kissing. With his looks and personality, he needed something extra going for him.
Does it say who I am? I don't think it does. Hello. I'm Lelia. In 1970, Jack Dowling and I were given a job to edit Dublin Opinion, which was a satirical magazine, a very kind of gentle enough satirical magazine called Dublin Opinion. And we asked Nell, who had just come to Dublin to work in the Irish Times, if she would do a column, which she did. She wrote some wonderfully hilarious stuff, and I just thought I would do one of them tonight. Sing, Sing for Bernadette, from little Nell McCafferty. Dear Prime Minister, read the Prisoners' Rehabilitation Services, which emphasises the new thinking current in this country, that prisons are for punishment, not for punishment merely, but are concerned with the reformation of prisoners' characters and helping them to start a new life, constructive, responsible, productive, and all that crap. It is with great regret that I must inform you, read this rehabilitation course, that we have met with singular lack of success in the reformation of one young girl who came to us some months back. We gave her thorough training in alternative employment. She was, you may remember, prior to her arrival here, engaged in common labouring, digging up streets, breaking up of stones, etc. And her language was something less than refined. She was given to oratorical outbursts in public places and public outbursts in oratorical places. She sometimes spent the night sleeping in London streets and showed herself not indifferent to militant wogs in foreign places. She was also the victim of an unfinished education. How best to cope with such a child? We taught her crocheting, a gentle and feminine occupation, much in demand in the underpopulated, underpaid wilds of the West, where us, as you hinted to me, this young lady might betake herself never to be heard of again. We provided her with extensive reading material from our library, the Tammy books, The Good Book, Mrs. Beaton's Household Hints, and daily copies of the national rag, the Belfast newsletter. We severely restricted the hordes of undesirables who daily came to have words with her. We indulged her whim to shorten the uniform to indecent lengths. We scrupulously examined the letters she wrote in an effort to help her grammar, punctuation, etc. We put her to bed early at night and raised her up early in the morning. We put her on a rigorous diet and made her take early, regular exercise. Dear Prime Minister, she likes the crochet work. But alas, as I have bade her goodbye this morning and presented her with a bundle of wool and some needles, she lapsed into pre-prison language and went off with her horde of undesirables. I fear that she is returning to the streets. I fear she is interested in house building. She says, however, she will look into the wages awarded to crocheters, so perhaps there is yet some hope. I think where we did succeed was in showing her the error of her past actions. I pointed out to her that the forces of law and order must be regarded and treated as such, and she completely agreed with me, which is nice, don't you think? I pointed out to her that this is a free country where the will of the people must be upheld, and she agreed with me, which should have been helpful, don't you think? I said we wanted work and homes for everyone, and she agreed. And why, Prime Minister, she showed me some pamphlets which were on exactly that subject, and I agreed, which is puzzling, don't you think? I said we wanted a country where no one would be in prisons, and she positively whooped with joy, and if I do say so, we executed a rather gay little pas de deux on the deluxe carpet of my deluxe office. Such were the agreeable transports of mutual agreement into which we found ourselves transported. But, Prime Minister, she refuses to seek work as a crocheter. In fact, she was quite crotchety about it. She prefers seasonal work, says she likes moving around, going back and forth to England. I don't know at all. Perhaps we should have given her a course in bricklaying. Yours, etc., Prison Governor, HM Prison, Armagh.
Nell, you have an image of being a very, very aggressive little lady. Are you?
I don't think I'm personally aggressive, certainly not to my friends or to people who are having a hard time. But I do find that I certainly get angry on certain topics, such as repression, poverty and the general condition of this country. And under such conditions, when I'm talking about these things, it would be ludicrous to do a song and dance act. There's nothing happy or beautiful about people suffering. I'm aggressive against institutions and bosses, certainly.
But when people see you on television, on discussion shows and so on, you sometimes do get very, very angry, and that puts them off.
I think the only people who are put off are people who would object to what I'm saying, whose vested interests I threaten. Certainly I haven't found reaction when I walk about the streets and talk to ordinary people that they're put off. In fact, they're all in there saying you should have given them more now.
Does your work, particularly your work in the courts, make you very, very bitter?
It makes me more depressed and bitter just because of the total agony of the human condition that we see here. It makes me bitter against the bosses or people in authority who are doing this to people and who, at no stage, as far as I can see, really show any understanding of what's going on or any sympathy for it. There's a total authoritarian concept in this country of the bosses talking to the people down below, a demand for obedience, a demand for conformity, and an absence of sympathy.
What sort of solution do you see?
To Ireland or to the courts or to the world? I want to see socialism and I want to see women's liberation. I don't think the two can be separated.
Would you call yourself a revolutionary?
Well, I like to think, I think in terms of revolution, yeah. I certainly don't see myself as a liberal, as a reformist.
You wouldn't accept the image of being a little angry lady revolutionary?
I certainly object to the image of being lady. I know people think that I'm angry, and I don't mind that, because as I say, the people not on whose behalf I am acting, people with whom I sympathise, I would say are totally in tune with me and agree. Those who are poor agree with what I'm saying. Those who are oppressed agree with what I'm saying. Just get in there and kick them. Let's not lie down anymore on it. It's not a manufactured aggressiveness, I just do get genuinely upset when I find these liberals coming on and being complacent and talking about people's conditions in abstract terms.
I've got a T-shirt on here which says, "What would Dermy say?" which might seem inappropriate and mysterious to a lot of people. Dermy was Dermy McClanahan, who had been a good friend of Nell's and my own for 70 years. We played football together. Nell was a dirty player. She really was. But the reason I was wearing it is that I remember being one day in William Street in Derry with Nell and Dermy and a few other people. And we're having an argument about something, and Dermy came out with the line, "Nell, you're a grand wee girl." Now, the significance of this remark is that Nell didn't bite his head off, nor did she even say, "Fuck off, Dermy." You know, which tells you something about how good a person Dermy McClanahan was and how perspicacious Nell was in understanding Dermy in the midst of the mayhem and conflict of the area and the time. I also remember Nell, sorry, sort of by way of introduction, and probably cutting down my time too much, but I remember Nell on Bloody Sunday in Derry. It's sort of a day that Derry people remember, all Derry people remember what they were doing and where they were standing on Bloody Sunday. And we finished up in Nell's house, or at least her parents' house, Nell McCafferty's house. And Bernadette Devlin was in the he sort of was in the, whatever you call it, in the doorway, sort of with a load of other people pushing and shoving, sort of in silence because of the shock still reverberating through the house and through the streets and through the whole area. And I can remember us pushing and shoving as Bernadette, because she was an MP, getting through to the hospital, Galvin Hospital, and asking them repeatedly, "I want the names of the people who've been killed. I want the names now. I'm Bernadette Devlin, I'm an MP." And she got it. And in the end, she did get it, because we knew that she was standing there, and I remember she started writing down the names of the dead people at Alaska. And I remember how everything went quiet, and people started stopped moving. They all went quiet in the hall as Bernadette just kept on writing. It was and you know, sort of that was a hard day for all of us. And Bloody Sunday, of course, Bloody Sunday happened sort of at that time, and then within a couple of days, not only did the world know about Bloody Sunday, but we all knew that the world had changed, that it was a different world, that it was a darker place, that it was a more fractious place, that it was a more divided place. He learned all that in an instant, in a way you would never have learned it through reading books. And I remember as the names were being read over the phone and people were shuffling around sort of and trying to make sense of it, sort of, and there was, I remember Lily McCafferty, Nell's mother. It was a sort of matriarch around the area. And Bernadette was repeating the names as he looked at me. Willie Nash, he's 17, he was shot, you know, and all these, James Ray at such and such an age and so on. And read them all out one by one, slowly, so that people could get them down sort of and understand them. Sort of. And at the end, as Bernadette came to the end of reading the names, I remember this picture along the hallway of Mrs. McCafferty, of Lily listening to these names being read out and standing there at the end with her hand over her mouth, just standing, as so many of us were. That was how I remember. That's my most vivid memory of Bloody Sunday and Bernadette and Nell and everybody together. Just as a diversion, the reason why I've got this T-shirt on which says, "What would Dermy do?" Dermy was Dermy McClanahan, very good friend of Nell's, as I've said. And I know that Dermy was a very good person, and I can prove it. The reason why I know that Dermy was a very, very good person is that one day he was standing with me and a couple of others and Bernadette in the street. And there's a bit of talk going on, and Dermy said to her, "You're a grand wee girl." Now, he got away with it. She didn't, bite his head off. Nor did she tell him to fuck off. And that tells you how good a man Dermy McClenaghan was. That's the best measure. If Nell McCafferty had that relationship with him and talked like that to him in those circumstances, you know he was near enough a saint, which he was. You know, sorry, I didn't mean to say all that, but I said now, so I can't stop. On that moment after Bloody Sunday, when Nell was writing down the names which Bernadette was relaying to us, she told me within 2 days, maximum 3, I forget when, that all that came out again, sort of as Nell wrote a piece. It was in the Starry Plough, which is a tiny little magazine we had, which was produced by dissident members of the official Republican movement. Now, there's a phrase which only those who go back a bit sort of recognise, dissident stickies. But Nell wrote this little piece within a couple of days, and I read it quickly, I've probably gone on too long. It's about Bloody Sunday. And to say a couple of days afterwards, 2 or 3 days afterwards, Nell wrote, Bloody Sunday was carried out with one objective. The British Army decided coldly and deliberately to shoot the risen people off the streets. We were shot with our backs turned, in some cases with our hands in the air, as we went to rescue the wounded. We were killed on the barricades and in the courtyards, and a few died God knows where. The vultures picked them up first. But the siege goes on. The 880 acres of Bogside, Brandywell and Cregan remain free. 40 of the 42 entrances to Free Derry remain barricaded. Sunday, Bloody Sunday, was a fine day and a foul day. It was a fine thing to swing down Southway, thousands of us, singing, to pick up thousands more of our comrades at the Brandywell, and then to swell through the Bogside, where it all began 4 years ago. We asked them then to ban the corporation, and they said no, and then they banned it. We demanded houses, and they said no, and then they built them. We demanded that Craig should go, and they said no, and then he went. We told the police to leave the Bogside, and they said no, running all the way back to the barracks. And when Sam Devaney died paying the price of it all, we thought it more than we could bear, but we did. Death was strange then. Death is no stranger now, but the price is higher and no easier to bear. No one who died was a stranger to us. What impossible things did we demand this time? That our internees be freed, that we walk on our own streets, that the Stormont cesspool be cleaned up. For the least of these and the best of these, 13 men were murdered last week. Let it be said of them with pride, they died on their feet and not on their knees. Let it not be said of us that they died in vain. Stay free, brothers and sisters. There will be another day. And so there will. But there'll never be another Nell McCafferty.
Nell wielded words like weapons, and she used those words to cut through the patriarchy like a knife through butter. And as I look around the world today, I think how much we will miss her. I'm going to read a very short piece from what I think is really one of her, if not her most incisive book, A Woman to Blame, The Kerry Babies Case, which was published by Attic Press in 1985, and is Nell's account, having sat at the Tribunal of Inquiry into the Kerry Babies case, day after day after day in Tralee. This is the story of professional men, the lawyers, doctors, police and priests who found woman to blame. It is also the story of one woman and the Kerry Babies Tribunal. It was medieval. A group of men put a young unmarried woman on the stand and questioned her about the exact circumstances of the conception and birth and death of her newborn baby. She came from a tiny village in the west of Ireland. They had come down from the capital, Dublin. The Pope had just come and gone from Ireland. The men wondered aloud if the woman had in fact given birth to 2 newborn babies who had been found dead in Kerry, though blood tests showed that she could only have been the mother of 1. The men put forward and examined for 6 months a theory of superfecundation, which postulates that a woman can conceive of twins by 2 men if she has sexual intercourse with both in the space of 24 hours. Oh, there were times when we all thought she had twins, said the presiding judge, Justice Kevin Lynch. The legal men and a succession of male doctors, psychiatrists, and police officers, 43 in all, spent 6 months probing the young woman's mind and body. A doctor gave the dimensions of her vagina during a previous birth. Ordnance survey maps were used to pinpoint the exact locations of the places where she had sexual congress with her married lover. The question was asked, did she love this man, or what other men were prepared to do with her? It was medieval, but it happened in 1985. The probing of the woman's sexual history brought the men gathered round her to such a fever pitch that she collapsed. She was excused temporarily and could be heard retching and sobbing in the corridor. The judge ordered that she be sedated and then brought back to testify. She gave evidence in a daze, her head bobbing off the microphone. The judge asked that her friends keep a suicide watch on her that night. The country was sickened and showed support for Joanne Hayes by sending her flowers and mass cards. When the Inquisition finally ended, the country rapidly changed by constitutional vote, and a new Ireland came into being. It was forged on the anvil of Joanne Hayes' suffering. Never again, the changes showed, would one woman be held to blame for the ills that had beset Ireland, or at least, never again would an exclusively male panel sit in judgment on one woman. Thank you.
But I want to remind you of one of your greatest moments now. That was 20 years ago. And you came through, was it Westland Row you came, or was it Kingsbridge? Where did the train come in? Can you remember?
Down there, the north side, Amiens Street.
Amiens Street. Came into Amiens Street. Did you start blowing them up like balloons and throwing them out the window? Was it you that started that, or was Mary Kenny?
No, it was Mary who blew up the condoms.
I see.
I was in charge of the pills.
You Nazi!
I've got that as well, and I'm not giving it to you. It's jelly. You're not getting it.
You mind putting up your bag?
No, you're not getting it. I refuse to give it to you.
Yes, we get sweeties in a minute, honey bun.
Enforce the Constitution! Enforce the Constitution! Enforce the Constitution! Enforce the Constitution! Enforce the Constitution!
evening, everybody, and thanks very much to Mary Redmond, and to everybody else who organised this evening and made it possible for us all to listen to her words. And also thank them for choosing the venue for the reasons that Olivia O'Leary mentioned, but also I particularly like it. The first time I ever spoke in public was in this Mansion House, and I will not tell you what Nell said to me after I had finished speaking, because mystery has its own attractions. I chose this particular piece because Nell had a very particular empathy with lower paid workers, both women and men. And cigarettes are integral to it, which is an intricate part of her day, a true reflection of her life, whether we approve or not. It heralds Nell at her pithy best, but it also signals another remarkable aspect of her. Few else would have bothered writing it. I chose this piece for that reason, but also because she cheekily, how else, dedicated it to her sister Nuala. Those of us in the room, family and intimate friends who also knew Nuala, understand what a beautiful gesture that was. The dedication reads, "To my own sister Nell McCafferty, who was once sacked when she asked for a wage rise from a pillar of Derry society. Now she is a union maid." The piece is called "Smoking Can Damage Your Health." There'll be people in the room who won't imagine that this could ever have happened. When the boss told them they couldn't smoke in the toilet anymore, 20 women workers in County Kildare declared a strike, occupied the factory and joined a trade union. This morning, after a 12-day struggle that changed their world, they returned to work with a rise in pay, increased holidays, and the strength of the ITGWU around them. "We looked for 3 breaks, but 2 will do. There has to be give and take," says Yvonne Moran. The union organiser for Kildare, Norman Croke, says they are the best trade unionists I have ever worked with. They are a joy to watch. Until Wednesday morning, the 5th of September, in the little Sport Tricot plant in Monasterevin, the women had been used to going to the toilet 3 times a day for an unofficial smoke and a chat. Apart from 1 tea break and lunch, they had been expected to sit in silence at their benches all day. We weren't allowed to talk, so the minutes in the toilet with a cigarette and a friend were welcome, Martina Murphy explained. She had been doing it for 8 years. Then they were asked not to go in pairs anymore. The women accepted this. You could be halfway through a cigarette and your pal would come in, so you'd light another to keep them company and the minutes would stretch. On that Wednesday morning, Martina Murphy went to the toilet area, not realising that someone else was there, and the two were interrupted by Monica Kelleher, wife of plant owner Pascal Kelleher, who said that no one was to smoke there anymore. A strike followed. It seemed like a small thing, says Yvonne Moran, but you let yourself be walked over on a little matter like that and you'd soon be crushed altogether. There had been bigger issues over the years. In times of recession, if 2 members of a family were working at Sports Tricot, one was made redundant. But in a village with few opportunities, that seemed fair, except, the women say, that the one let go was usually the one with the most experience and the higher wage. The sequence of events that Wednesday, as told by the women, followed the pattern of a family row. We stopped to talk about it, says Yvonne, and then Pascal, who was the owner of the factory, came around and said, "Right, lads, get back to work." We said we were on strike, and he said we hadn't a leg to stand on because we weren't in a union, so we occupied the factory. They're not sure why. It's the sort of thing you see on television. There were those people in Woolworths, Martina said vaguely. Pascal switched off the power and went home. The women sat in the gathering gloom and gradually dozed off. 2 of them, girls just out of school, had only been in Tricot for a fortnight. Their nerve failed them and they burst into tears with hunger and cold. We told them to go on home, but it was very late and they were afraid of the dark, so they stayed on. By dawn, they were all sick from smoking. All day Thursday, the occupation continued, though Pascal paid them their wages for the previous week. The union man was then summoned, and he went with them to the FUE meeting, despite suspicion that they weren't really his members. A union doesn't recruit during a strike, lest it is liable for strike pay. Neither Pascal Kelleher nor the FUE pushed that issue. They seemed relieved to be talking with a sensible man who at least got the women out of the factory. Norman watched Martina look this FUE guy in the face and say, "Do you have to have permission to have a smoke? Are you forbidden to speak to your colleagues?" Unused to jargon, the women were devastating. The men then made an official contact. A county councillor whom Pascal knew contracted a county councillor whom Norman knew, and a settlement was negotiated before signatures were formally appended at a formal meeting with the women. The agreed document is nearly 40 pages long. Mr. Kelleher can say that smoking in the toilets thrice daily has been stamped out. The sweetener for the rule-bound women is a rise to union rates, 4 more days annual holiday, plus 2 extra periods in the canteen, during which they can smoke their heads off if they want to. They can well afford it now.
Hi everyone. I'm going to touch on Nell McCafferty's lesser known career as a men's fashion journalist, which, as you can imagine, was brief. As brief as this column. This is a column from 14th of January 1974 in the Irish Times. And the headline is, "What will the well-dressed man wear during 1974? The well-dressed man should wear clothes this year, because if he does not, he will be very cold. One of the reasons why he will be very cold is that we are suffering from a fuel shortage. One of the reasons why we are suffering from a fuel shortage is that the miners who get their clothes dirty while digging underground are not being paid enough for the work they are doing, and certainly not being paid for removing their dirty clothes and washing themselves in the interests of hygiene. If the miners were paid more, we would have more fuel. The miners could afford clean clothes themselves, and men in general wouldn't have to wear so many clothes throughout the year. That is all I have to say about men's fashions."
I want to know what it felt like to be a young woman with a job in Dublin and plenty of things needing to be done on behalf of women. What were your feelings?
I loved writing Leila.
Yes, good. Tell me.
And I you see, I knew enough from having concert with other journalists, and I think I said to you, I realised later the number of journalists get into my mother's house, get on off the street, sit down, meet all the neighbours, IRA, former IRA, people like that. Wasn't it great for them? They got off the streets and into a Bogside house and see what was going on and hear what was going on. There's no holds barred.
And it gave you the prominence and the, one aspect of your life, but you were obviously doing a million other things as well. Given your life now, what wisdoms have you? I mean, you've been working on behalf of women. You've been taking part in things which have achieved contraception, divorce, equality, abortion. All of these, would be regarded as civil rights that women are entitled to.
Yes, now.
Are you content with that?
Well, I'm not content with myself, Leila, in that I'm at an age now, 76, where I cannot have two consecutive clear thoughts. My mind is, as they say in South Wexford, a Marley.
What's left to be done? If you were now starting out again,
I spend too much time having what I call maggot thoughts, maggots in my head. For example, there was announced on radio a few weeks ago that someone, a domestically abused woman, had had her arm broken in 3 places. And I thought, she must have been squealing. How do you break an arm in 3 places? Did someone tie her down? And I go through that in my head. Do you break it at the wrist and you're squealing? Do you tie your hand to the table and then break it again, the forearm, and you're still squealing, and then you break it again the 3rd time? Somebody's squealing while that is happening. What about the person who's doing it? What do they think? I think about it far too much. Domestic violence.
it's heavy. It's a
Heavy.
heavy.
Well, I do know that some women who work in women's aid have had to give up talking. They had to get training, talking to women who are domestically abused. They had to stop it after a few months because it was upsetting them.
Really?
And upsetting their minds and putting violence into their thoughts. And I sometimes, I still do, have violent thoughts in my head. I go through it in my head, what would I do? And I think, well, supposing you were domestically, no, I'll just say a man, domestically abusing a woman. For example, that man who broke the woman's arm 3 times. I think to myself, what I'll do with you is I'll carry a leather apron and I'll have a little hand revolver inside it and I'll take it out, and when I see you or hear of you're abusing a woman, I will shoot you in the left elbow and the right knee. So if you're shot in the right knee now, you need a crutch, but you can't use your left arm.
It's very specific. It is all right.
I think about that a lot and think, oh God, I wish. Yeah, domestic violence against domestic abuse is the big bugbear in my life at the moment.
I'm going to read you a piece that Nell wrote in 1984. It was published in Dublin. It's called The Death of Anne Lovett. And for those of you who don't remember or were too young to know, Anne Lovett was a 15-year-old girl who died in a grotto to the Blessed Virgin, having just given birth to a baby son who also died. I had to edit this piece because it was coming in at 14 minutes long, and I can tell you that editing a piece really shows you how good a writer is, and Nell was superb. But I think it's true what Eamon said about, there'll never be another Nell McCafferty, but I would just like to say that I think that there are many, many really brilliant women who are journalists now who were influenced by Nell and who have learned so much from her, so her legacy is living on in journalism. This was published in 1984. As in her pregnancy, so it was in her death. The people of Granard say with one voice, ask the family. Anne Lovett's welfare was the inviolate responsibility of her parents. Even had I noticed she was pregnant, says Canon Gilfillan, parish priest, I could hardly just come out and say, you're pregnant. A businessman who used to work with the St. Vincent de Paul says, if a family doesn't want to acknowledge that you know, there's nothing you can do. We knew Anne Lovett was pregnant. The family said nothing. Dermot Lovett, father of 9 and on the dole, is not entirely without standing. He has lived 3 years in Granard above his non-trading pub. He comes from a family of substance, the Lovetts who used to run a family building firm in nearby Kilnalek. Dermot Lovett is by general reckoning an abrupt, independent man. People could hardly just come out and offer help that might be misinterpreted as interference. It was assumed that the family knew and had made arrangements. Did the family know? Ask the family, says the community. The sister of Anne Lovett, with whom Anne had spent some time in Dublin before Christmas, says no comment. Dermot and Patricia Lovett refused to speak to reporters. 10 days after Anne's death, the Gardaí had not been able to secure an interview with her parents. But the death in a public place of a teenage girl and her newborn baby demands an attempted explanation. It will be up to the family to explain how it could be that their daughter died unaided and alone. The efforts of the townspeople are directed towards explaining how they, the townspeople, could not come to her aid, though her condition was common knowledge. The Convent of Mercy School called in a solicitor who helped them draft a statement to the effect that the staff did not know that Anne Lovett was pregnant. Did they, however, suspect that she was? A spokeswoman, trembling and refusing to give her name, told in Dublin that the school would not comment on whether they or not they suspected. They certainly did not know. Meanwhile, the Gardaí pursue a duty which they describe as sickening. A technical sexual offence has been committed, carnal knowledge of an underage girl. They must interview any boyfriends with whom Anne Lovett may have been keeping company. It would be a mercy to establish the line of paternity from there, because that would eliminate another line of inquiry in a town and country now bursting with outspoken rumour. 12 days after Anne Lovett's death, Canon Gilfillan during Sunday Mass lashed out at the media for descending like locusts to plague and torment the townspeople about a family matter. His sermon veered from a plea that it should be treated as such to a tirade against men committing adultery in their hearts when they lust after women. And he added, "When divorce comes to the vote, as it surely will, we'll know where we stand, against it, with the church and with Christ." As for his teenage parishioners, a notice cut out of an Irish press article on Anne Lovett's death has been tacked high in the corner of the bulletin board in the church porch. Where to find help, the newsprint reads, in pregnancy has been pencilled in. They can find help anywhere but Granard, it seems. No confidential telephone number in the town has been pencilled in. Some of the services advertised use answering devices which advise the caller to ring back. The services keep school hours. How can you ring back from Granard's only public phone in Main Street without attracting attention? But then Anne Lovett had attracted a lot of attention in her short lifetime. "Wake up, Granard," she used to shout down Main Street after nightfall. Her father used to publicly pull her home from the grocery store come billiards hall, where she spent much of her time. The sight of him and of her, whom they knew to be pregnant, allayed concern as to who was taking responsibility for her welfare. He'd give her a cuff. Many a father does. You don't call in the ISPCC, do you? If anything, you'd say he was doing his best, wouldn't you? And he'd be entitled to give you a cuff yourself if you stepped in. But why would we step in? The family looked all right. Anne Lovett looked properly fed and dressed and bright-eyed. The fact that she was pregnant, besides, was no reason for intervention. If there was a tension between her and her father, which there was, and if it was known, which it was, and if she spent a lot of time in the houses of her friends, what else could you expect in the circumstances? It was only natural, wasn't it? On the day of Anne Lovett's death, nobody informed the guards of the events at the grotto. One of them, coming on duty at 6 o'clock in the evening, remarked that there were rumours in town of an abortion. It was 8 o'clock, 3.5 hours after Anne Lovett had been found, before the guards established the facts by dint of foot slogging and telephone calls around the locality. Dr. Tom Donoghue, Deputy Coroner for the area, was a man well versed in the legal procedures that flow from the discovery of a dead body. It must not be moved. Dr. Donoghue, who had treated Anne Lovett for shingles on her back shortly before Christmas, treated her as she lay dying in the grotto. She was then moved by ambulance to Meath. The baby, which was dead and should not have been moved, was taken with her. Dr. Donoghue refused to comment on what was treated in the circumstances as a family affair. The grotto where Anne Lovett gave birth is the most secluded spot in Granard town, which is why the young go there when they're mitching from school. You turn sharp left up a broad, leafy, walled lane and step through a gate into a lonely, quarried dell enclosed by a tall thicket. High up on the granite face of the dell is the Virgin Mary. She can be seen from the public road through the evergreen trees. A girl giving birth at her feet would not be seen. A girl might give birth there and leave the baby behind. Other babies in other places have been left behind by young girls who then walked away. A crazy idea in a small town, of course, but if no one knew for sure she was pregnant, a young girl might persuade herself that she could get away with it. Is that what happened? Ask the family. Journalists must ask the family after her death what others would not ask the family during her life. Don't ask the state or the church or the people. They did their duty last year, so amending the Constitution as to ensure that all pregnancies would be brought to full term. Nowhere in that amendment was provision made for life or lives beyond the point of birth. Those are family matters. Anne Lovett brought her pregnancy to full term, on stony ground, in winter. Mother and child died. Why? How? Ask the family. We'll stand by until they speak. Until they speak, we'll stand by. You can't interfere with the family, dead or alive.
I covered the Troubles from time to time with Nell, and I was always very pleased and relieved to see her in the vicinity because I knew she had my back, and not just mine, but any other reporters. And she mentions that in a throwaway line here in this piece I'm about to read. It's 1987. And Nell has just caused consternation in an RTE radio studio. Conor Cruise O'Brien has asked what became a ritual question with him to each panellist on the show: do you support the IRA? And Nell McCafferty said, I do. And next day, the Remembrance Day bomb explodes in Enniskillen. And as Nell says in this piece, I sat there, metaphorically covered in blood. It would have been cowardly to recant. I was stuck with my own morality, that once you put a gun in their hands, you accept responsibility for their actions. All the papers and magazines and radio stations for which I worked, other than RTE, which had banned me, asked me to write about how I felt now. I wrote and I broadcast that I would seek redemption. The arrogance of that. Redemption, by handing in my Irish passport and taking up a British one. That would prove to Northern Protestants, I hoped, that I didn't want a united Ireland without their agreement. I didn't want to force my politics down anyone's throat at the point of a gun. At the same time, I wouldn't be forced into anything by a British gun. After I said that on BBC Radio, I got a call from my mother. I was too upset to pick up the phone. I listened to her voice on the answering machine. Nell, she said. Nell, pick up the phone, daughter. I love you, daughter. Pick up the phone. I was satirised wonderfully on BBC Radio Ulster by a dairyman who composed a ditty about my proposed British citizenship, Lady Nell from Brandywell. I got a call from Brian Friel offering me refuge in his holiday home in Donegal. I got a lovely note from Tim Pat Coogan of the Irish Press wishing me well. My job was not in danger. A teenage boy in Derry stopped me in the dark street and said, "Thanks for what you said about us in the IRA." At the British Embassy, the porter gave me an application form for British citizenship, to which I was entitled by virtue of being born in the north. He stood under a portrait of the Queen. My Queen. I needed a sponsor for my application. I got a sombre letter from the great Irish parliamentarian John Kelly of Fine Gael, implacable opponent of the IRA, in which he declined to sponsor me. It wasn't that I was untouchable. He could not, would not, ask anyone to give up Irish citizenship. My union sent a formal letter of protest about the ban to RTE, then shut completely up. Nuala was magnificent. She came home, said nothing, and brought me as her lunch companion to the annual Print Media Awards, where she was named Journalist of the Year. There was a frisson as we entered the room. Journalists with whom I'd worked for 17 years did not talk to me. There were journalists there who'd been glad of my company in the north as I steered them clear of danger, of which they were blithely ignorant, who'd partaken of my mother's hospitality, who'd shared amiable nights with off-duty provosts, who'd supported my feminist activities, who turned conspicuously away. Nuala chatted steadfastly to me and did not mention the war or the shunning. Under her calm influence, I did not have recourse to alcohol, which was freely flowing. I didn't mistake her companionship for endorsement of my politics. Christ, was I glad this woman loved me. I disappeared from public view, but paradoxically, invitations flowed in to speak at universities and civic groups and women's groups. Though they didn't agree with me, people wanted to hear what it was that the government and public broadcasting service did not want them to hear. The Section 31 broadcasting ban, which kept the provosts off the airwaves, didn't end until 1994. But in the years leading up to that, there was plenty of discussion about them and with them among political insiders. An undersecretary from the British Embassy took me to dinner regularly. I informed Sinn Féin of the relationship, lest they mistake me for an informer. Ambassador Jean Kennedy Smith had me to dinner at the American Embassy. I became a member of the Northern Star Lunch Club, which held private weekly meetings in Dublin with Northern guests such as Peter Robinson, David Irvine, Gerry Adams, and Martin McGuinness. Our membership included David Andrews of Fianna Fáil and Rory Quinn of Labour. Nobody minded listening to me behind closed doors.
How's it going? Now for something a little bit different. A reading from Nell by Nell McCafferty. A motley bunch of us, the only ones of our generation who were still unmarried and were still avoiding careers, took off to London for the summer of 1965. We rented a flat and worked at anything that came our way. I went to see Marlene Dietrich in a one-woman show. She was on stage in a full-length white fur coat. She let it slide off her shoulders to the floor and allowed us to admire her bare shoulder, bosom to ankle, silver-frocked, splendid self, while the band struck the opening chords of Lily Marlene. After we roared with hunger and admiration, she thrust a long leg through a slit in her garment to show a foot clad in a high stiletto. My friend Michael from Derry, who was working in London, escorted me to a gay club. I explained to him that I had to see for myself what other gay people looked like. The club was located in a dingy basement in Soho. The first person I saw was a young black woman still wearing her post office uniform of a jacket, trousers and boots. She was fat, she was butch, she was awful. I clung to Michael's arms, saw through the dim light that the men were effeminate and the women aggressively unwomanly, and I fled the place in shame and despair. A woman with whom I had been having a passionate platonic relationship with, books, music, worry about family preoccupied us. She stayed with me before we embarked on our separate immigrant lives. We were in a single bed. I kissed her, she recoiled. It was over in seconds. The word lesbian rang out. Our friendship endured, but I never again made the first move on a female. I went to Cannes in September, where I'd been engaged at low pay with full board and lodging in a school that overlooked the seafront as an assistante anglaise. My job was to engage secondary school girls in English conversation. It was a ruse to get yet another year away from the world of real work. The real aim was to attend the Cannes Film Festival the following May and look at all the stars. Before leaving, I dumped all my jeans and flat shoes, and I arrived at the school wearing an outrageously expensive white wool coat, trimmed with llama fur and stiletto heels. That night, an assistant teacher from Sicily, flirty and cheeky, invited me to her single bedroom to play cards. When I finally went back to my own room, I heard her out in the corridor gleefully telling the other assistant teachers, "Elle est lesbienne!" So much for the frock and fur. At weekends, I spent most of the time travelling about the south of France with young British men who were teaching in a nearby boys' school. One of them, Mario, a Glasgow-born Scot of Italian parentage, told me after our first meeting that his heart had sunk at my appearance when I came walking down the street towards him. Being Scottish, he had been hoping for an English rose, and instead this small, roly-poly Irish female came barreling at me. I pointed out that he was of pretty small stature himself, was less than an oil painting, and that I had felt relief upon seeing him because he clearly had not the wherewithal to push his luck with any female. And most certainly not with the statuesque English rose we found teaching in a school in the village of Grass up in the hills, where the film star Dirk Bogarde lived. All the same, I liked Mario's mind. He was biting, cynical, and as worried as myself about what the future might hold. We sparred all year over the women we met, trying to seduce them with our conversation, and I always won handily. Unlike yourself, Mario, I consoled him, no woman needs fear that I'm going to jump her bones. That's because you don't dare, he said shrewdly. We grumbled our way around Nice and Monte Carlo, Arles, Aix-en-Provence, sharing a double room and even a double bed to save money. I read every English book in the local library, then Gone with the Wind in French, and once spent an entire week's wages buying a Chinese dinner for the English Rose from up the hill. She'd wanted a change from French food. Mario was hugely gratified when I told him in despair that conversation between her and me had ground to a halt. That was the year I discovered the works of Henry Miller from the effects of which I have not yet recovered. One of the books opened with a man inserting a candle into a woman's vagina. I had already been persuaded by the French girls to try a tampon, but had not grasped that I was supposed to remove the cardboard tube and nearly caused myself injury. This was also the era of the Profumo scandal in England, and in general, the swinging 60s seemed to consist of men in suits consorting with women who worked as high-class prostitutes or male rock stars who hung about with female groupies. There was nowhere in this scenario in which I could fit. Once, on the beach, on a sad, lonely Saturday afternoon, while all the other teaching assistants had gone home to their parents, a swarthy man picked me up. I dutifully laid myself out in the rocks, like a fish on a slab. He bent over, kissed me, and then uttered a dismissive snort. I did not blame him, and hated myself for even trying to accommodate him. Another night, I allowed myself to be picked up by an Algerian immigrant, the most despised of France's colonised people, and the poor bastard spent a fortune taking me to a nightclub. There were a handful of people there staring dispassionately at an overweight woman who sat in a swimsuit in a foaming bathtub, listlessly passing a tubular sponge between her legs. After that, I contented myself with evenings spent in the school reading or going to a cultural evening of chamber music. On rare occasions, I treated myself to a morning in a cafe, drinking coffee and inserting precious coins into a jukebox, which played the birds singing "Hey, Mr. Tambourine Man." We were all waiting in that small, windy, flybone town for the film festival. I swam a lot to lose what I now realise were delicious curves. Once I reached a buoy far out in the sea. Grabbing it, I wrapped my legs around the thick chain that bound it to the ocean floor and swayed there, looking back to shore. Eventually, the childhood sensation of clinging to a lamppost came back. It was pleasurable and shameful. Was this to be my life, screwing a lifebuoy? At least I wasn't kissing the rubber ball, I had consoled myself. I swam disconsolately back to shore. My bikini bottoms and upper thighs were covered in oil from the chain.
I need musicians. Sir Barry Donoghue, Conor Brady, how's it going? Nice to be here. We'll start off with a song and then I'll tell a story. He's cold. It's a bit cold. Holding my breath and my tongue, I don't want to get this wrong. Biting my nails, biding my time, until all the stars collide. Maybe it's me, maybe it's you. What if I don't? What if I do? Being so close, so still, we are both wrapped up in this. Whatever this is, I'm unsure. I'll know in just 1 minute more. Maybe it's me, maybe it's you. This is the moment then. This is the moment then. The feel of adrenaline when I feel you on my skin. This is the moment then. that changes everything. Maybe it's me, maybe it's you. This is the moment. What if I don't? What if I do? This is the moment then I get to feel again the rush of adrenaline. This is the moment then that changes everything. Maybe it's me, maybe it's you. What if I don't? What if I do? This is the moment. Maybe it's me, maybe it's you. What if I don't? What if I do? Thanks very much. I guess I got to know and meet Nell McCafferty in the early 80s, maybe 84, 85. I did a song called The Beach, which was about the Bishop of Galway banning two-piece swimming costumes on women. It wasn't fucking Eamon Casey, it was the one before that, Dr. Michael Brown. Neil Tobin told me recently that he worried I would be arrested for saying things. He was a young man students' union in Galway. So the Bishop of Galway, Dr. Michael Brown, thought that men might be inclined to commit sin in their minds or their thoughts or maybe even their deeds if they saw a woman on Salt Hill Beach wearing a bikini. So two-piece swimming costumes were banned in the diocese for the 60s and the 70s. So this is a kind of a funny story about swimming without your knickers on. The one piece would do just fine. So whichever bit you felt more comfortable wearing, the top or the bottoms. He was walking on the beach when I went down for a swim. I hadn't got my togs with me. I wanted to strip off and go in. I knew he knew what I wanted to do, but still he wouldn't go. Well, he stood and watched the show. I was sitting at the bar, having had a lot to drink, and I was talking to this guy. He'd only just come in, I think, and my head was spinning around. And when I tried to go, well, he stood and watched the show. Strange bishop. They were all strange. I was walking him back home, and I asked him to come in. Well, I thought that I might take the chance his legs were a little bit thin. I tried to get through to him using every trick I know, but he stood and watched the show. He stood and watched the show. He stood and watched the show. You. So I was talking to your man Tobin there when we were out in RT one day, and he was asking me, was I not afraid to speak about stuff, growing up? And I became unafraid because of people like women like Nell McCafferty, who went before me and gave me the courage to be able to speak. And could we all just give her a fucking huge hand? Woo! Nell! She showed us the way. This is a song that I was invited by Nell to go to the teacher's place up in, what was it? That's the one? Parnell Square. And they wanted me to come in and do a few songs. And I had a band. There were men. And they were saying, you can't fucking bring them in here. And I said, well, that's a whole other kind of a discrimination, isn't it, if I can't bring the band in just because they're men? So they relented anyways, and Nell was afraid that they might see things that they wouldn't be used to seeing and stuff like that, and that they might be too young to take it on board and be okay with it. So anyways, I sang this song, and she took all her clothes off. Well, just her top, really. Everything that was underneath it as well. And she danced wildly to this next song. And over the years, I've changed the words a little bit to include the wearing of condoms. And indeed, I used to show people how to put condoms on in the 80s in Ireland when we mightn't have been able to do such things. Dog lessons, Barry. Oh, fuck. I want to be seduced. I want a man to take me out to dinner. I'd like to see his eyes get moody, thinking about the thought of what flirting's gonna do. I want him to be real cool. I want him to think about getting me right into bed. Have a chat about wearing condoms. Don't flutter my heartstrings. Jesus, Mary, that little thing won't fit me, he said. I might demur politely, but very slightly, if he tried to fondle my knee. But I'm relatively certain I'd compromise if I know me. Woo. I want to be seduced. I want a man to talk to me suggestively. I'd like to hear him say he'll be with me tomorrow morning, drinking hot jasmine tea. I want him to make me laugh. I want him to make a point of touching me when we talk, leaving all the jealous boys at the bar to mumble in their beer and gawk. You know it only happens when I'm napping, nodding in reverie. but I wouldn't mind a man who wouldn't mind seducing right from the minute that we'd been introduced. How's it going? I wouldn't mind a man who wouldn't mind seducing me. Thank you very much. Mr. Conor Brady, Barry Donoghue.
That's me. Hi. Oh. When Mary Redmond contacted me to invite me here tonight, thanks very much, Mary, I thought back to the earliest connection I had to Nell. It was through her journalism in the Irish Times, those mind-altering columns in the eyes of the law, detailing the surreal, absurdist practices in the courts of the Republic that passed for justice for the poor back in the 1970s. It wasn't just that she chronicled the usually hidden lives of the oppressed in what was essentially a middle-class paper. It was that her own shining spirit and open-hearted desire for justice animated her writings. Here was a born storyteller shaping stories that built solidarity and energized activism. Somewhere in the shady lobes of my memory, I recalled a piece about squatting in Derry, something about Christmas. I know at the time I read it, I was a young teenager, 14 years of age, and just fired up by the Dublin Housing Action Committee, who were marching on the streets and squatting houses and flats in Dublin's inner city. So Nell's article detailing a developing squatting movement in the north was a kind of harmonizing music to my little red ears. I went on the hunt and found the very piece in the Irish Times archive. No room for the crib, Nell McCafferty, December 24th, 1969, Christmas Eve, 1969. As a child of the Dublin tenements myself, I had witnessed firsthand the things she described. There is a tremendous relief in that mirroring, a vindication in the truth-telling, and a restoration of dignity. I remember feeling I am not alone in what I've seen, in what I've felt. I quote from Nell from that piece. What does the child do in the middle of the night when the stairs are dark and the toilet far away? The bucket on the landing is a phenomenon not entirely confined to prisons. It is the familiar hallmark of slum dwellers and houses with outside toilets. It is always made of tin to support the weight of older children. And if the thin, cold rim is too sharp for tender buttocks, you grip it with your hands and sit on them. I must have related to this part of her article describing the housing list, as it was so similar to our own situation, and I had often gone with my father to the Corpo offices on Lord Edward Street to see had we moved up the list, the man at the hatch advising my father to have another baby. Again, I quote from Nell. It was recorded that the parents and one child slept on a bed settee, the baby in a cot, that cooking facilities were a single gas ring, and the toilet and water tap were on the ground floor, 5 flights below, that the rent was £2.15 a week, that the mother had spent 3 weeks in a nerve clinic, and one child had asthma. They had not enough children to merit urgent consideration on the waiting list, and indeed there were numerous cases much worse than theirs. The small, intimate stresses of their day-to-day life under such conditions went naturally unrecorded in the official analysis. She could have been writing about Dublin all right in those days. In these days, I want to read this poem in her memory in honour of her clear-eyed determination to chronicle her times and in honour of her courage. And I know that there are many activists here today who have taken hold of that baton as she passed it on. So this poem is a zone of sanctuary. It is old as the fates, the stars above spin, night after night on the face of the heavens, endlessly telling each other their stories. It is newborn each day with its latest version. It says, come forward to childhood, to be cradled, to be dandled, to be held, to be lulled. It falls like rain to parched earth. It fires the seed that waits with patience for its moment to open. It says, you are worthy, deserving of love. This poem is a zone of sanctuary. It will speak the unspeakable. It promises a language to bind body to soul. Its business is truth. Its business is justice. It holds these words as a solemn promise to those shackled in hells of earthly torment. It will carry your witness, a cherished gift. It opens its doors to all who need shelter. It is humbled by your courage when you cross the threshold. It takes your hand. It unclenches your fist, finger by finger. It opens to the light the lines of your future that channel your energy to make yourself whole. This poem is a zone of sanctuary. Its words are refuge from the abusers of words. If it says river, sky, star, street, it means river, sky, star, street. It means exactly what it says and says exactly what it means. It restores to words their ancient dignities. Though the world may be blind and deaf to your suffering, it hears you, it sees you. It knows that the child deep inside feels defiled with every outrage, predation, or plunder, with every transgression of their bodily form. It reminds you again of your magnificent wildness, that you move in grace, a creature of nature, hardwired to survive. Its garden is boundless. Come rest in its shelter, sleep safe in its shade. Look, the day moon mirrored in its pool. Look, the seedlings in patterns, their colors radiant. This poem honors your birthright. It honors the guardians who defend and vindicate this inviolate space. This poem is a zone of sanctuary. Thank you very much.
Well, we're coming towards the end, and I just want to say a big thank you, and I'm sure you'll all join in with me, to all of our speakers who made Nell's words come alive again. There was no more powerful writer than Nell. She did not abuse words, and they meant what she said. So just a big applause for all of our readers. And for Mary Marvellous Coughlan, who just warms the cockles of my heart. I'm still throbbing from Mary Coughlan. I'm sure that would have been forbidden in 1960 by the Bishop of Galway. A lot of work went into organising and setting up this evening. And, you know, a big thank you particularly to Mary Redmond for all of this. And all I want to say here now is thank you all for coming. It was so wonderful to come in and see so many faces that we knew, and to know that it was Nell who brought you all here. God bless her. And I'm now going to leave it to the woman herself to take our leave of you.
Good night, sisters.